History has proven that no empire lasts forever. The Romans ruled for over a millennium, the Ottomans spanned continents, and the USSR shaped modern geopolitics, yet all of them fell. Today, the US empire is showing the same warning signs. While it may still appear powerful, the cracks are undeniable. The downfall of an empire doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process, and the symptoms are already here. At its height, Rome was the most powerful civilization in the world, but its collapse was slow and came from within. The gap between the rich and the poor widened as elites indulged in extravagant wealth, while common citizens barely survived. The economy polarized, the middle class vanished, and the government struggled to maintain stability. Corruption, high taxation, peasant revolts, and over-reliance on enslaved labor only made things worse. The US is now experiencing a similar decline. The American dream once symbolized prosperity for anyone who worked hard, owning a home, raising a family, and achieving financial stability. But today, that dream is fading. The middle class is shrinking as wages stagnate, while inflation and living costs skyrocket. Housing has become unaffordable. Healthcare is out of reach for many, and corporations profit while the working class struggles. The wealth gap in the US has reached historic levels. Billionaires amass enormous fortunes while the average worker can barely keep up with expenses. This disparity has fueled resentment, protests, and increasing political polarization. More and more Americans feel disillusioned with the system, realizing that democracy and equal opportunity are illusions designed to keep them compliant. The Ottoman Empire thrived for centuries by maintaining loyalty among its diverse subjects. Its strength wasn't just in military power, but in diplomacy and cultural influence. But as nationalism spread, people stopped identifying with the empire and sought independence, causing its control to weaken. The US built its empire after World War II through soft power, positioning itself as the champion of democracy, economic progress, and cultural influence. American music, films, and brands dominated the world, and institutions like the United Nations, the IMF, and the World Bank were shaped to serve US interests. But this influence is fading. At home, faith in American democracy has eroded. Protest over racial injustice, economic inequality, and political corruption have exposed deep societal fractures. The country once known for its freedoms and human rights is now synonymous with police brutality, mass surveillance, and rigged political systems. Abroad, the US is no longer the respected leader it once was. It has waged destructive wars, funded oppressive regimes, and interfered in other nations' politics. The hypocrisy of preaching democracy while supporting dictators and committing war crimes has made it difficult for other nations to take US rhetoric seriously. Countries that once followed America's lead are now seeking alternatives, forging new alliances and economic partnerships outside of US influence. The Soviet Union never saw itself as an empire, but in reality, it functioned like one, using military power, ideology, and economic control to keep its satellite states in check. But maintaining this vast system was costly. Wars like Afghanistan drained its economy, while citizens at home struggled with poverty. The empire became unsustainable, and by the late 1980s, it collapsed. The US is following the same trajectory. Trillions of dollars have been spent on wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, and beyond. Wars that have brought destruction and chaos, but little strategic benefit. The country continues to fund Ukraine's war against Russia and may soon get involved in a Taiwan-China conflict. The US maintains over 700 military bases worldwide and spends more on its military than the next 10 countries combined. Yet, despite this spending, America has not won a major war in decades. Meanwhile, Americans back home face increasing economic hardship. Public services remain underfunded, infrastructure is decaying, and millions struggle to afford basic necessities. The government prioritizes military spending while its own people suffer, a pattern seen in many declining empires throughout history. The recent US support for Israel's actions in Gaza has further damaged its global reputation. Billions of taxpayer dollars have been used to fund a war widely condemned as genocide, shattering any remaining illusions of American moral superiority. Even among US allies, faith in American leadership is rapidly declining. The US empire has dominated world affairs for decades, controlling global finance, trade, and politics. But the world is changing. A growing number of nations are moving away from the US-led system, choosing to trade in different currencies, form new military alliances, and create independent financial institutions. The BRICS alliance, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is challenging Western economic dominance, while countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia are seeking alternatives to US influence. The systems that have upheld US dominance, its financial institutions, military alliances, and global trade structures are unsustainable. They depend on exploitation, economic coercion, and military threats. But as the world shifts towards a multipolar order, these tactics are becoming less effective. Empires do not fall in a single day. They decline gradually as their foundations weaken. The US is in the midst of that decline. Internal economic hardship, loss of global influence, military overreach, and increasing resistance to its rule are all signs of an empire in decay. The question is not if the US will fall, it is how fast it will happen.